Welcome back, comic lore lovers. Tonight, we explore a question that has haunted fans for decades. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story carry you away. Imagine yourself gently settling into a favorite armchair, perhaps with a soft blanket draped over you. Feel the slow, even rhythm of your breath. The world outside begins to fade, replaced by a quiet hum of anticipation, a soft thrumming that whispers of forgotten possibilities and paths untaken. We journey to Asgard, the Golden Realm, not as it was always known, but as it might have been, on a day that would echo through eternity. The air in the grand ceremonial hall hung heavy with unspoken expectations, thick with the scent of ancient magic and the gleam of polished gold. Before the assembled host of Asgard's mightiest, the Allfather Odin stood, his gaze profound, his voice resonating with the weight of ages. He had set a challenge, a test of character and heart for his sons, and at its core, a simple, yet impossibly profound relic. Mjolnir, the hammer of storms, now lying inert upon a velvet cushion on a stone pedestal. It awaited a touch, a will, a spirit worthy of its immense power, its inscription a silent, powerful promise. Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. The air crackled, not yet with lightning, but with the silent tension of a kingdom holding its breath, poised on the edge of a pivotal moment. The focus of every eye, then, was on one prince. Allow your mind to drift, to settle deeper into the narrative, feeling the textures of the story unfolding. Notice the cool, clean lines of the marble, the distant shimmer of the Bifrost. The first to step forward was Thor, the favored son, a warrior prince already brimming with strength and conviction, yet, perhaps, lacking a certain humility. His approach was confident, his hand reaching for the hammer with the assurance of one destined for greatness. He gripped the handle, muscles tensing, a slight grunt escaping his lips as he pulled. Then he pulled harder, and harder still. The great hall remained hushed, the collective breath of Asgard held, waiting for the inevitable ascent of the hammer. But Mjolnir remained, unyielding, rooted to its cushion, as if forged into the very stone of the pedestal. Thor's face, once beaming with pride, slowly tightened with frustration. Then, with a dawning confusion that morphed into a quiet, simmering anger, he released the handle, his gaze darting around the silent assembly, seeking an explanation, a validation that did not come. In the peripheral vision of the court, a slender figure observed from the dappled shadows cast by the grand columns. Loki, the god of mischief, Thor's younger brother, stood with an unreadable expression. His usual mischievous glint was subdued, replaced by something more introspective, a flicker of thought perhaps born of a desperate ambition, or a genuine, if hidden, desire for his father's approval. He watched Thor's failed attempt. A small, almost imperceptible shift in his posture, betraying a quiet contemplation, an idea stirring within him. Let your awareness softly expand, feeling the cool air on your skin, the quietness deepening around you. The scene now shifts, focusing on the slender figure who hesitated for a moment. Then, with a subtle shift in his cloak, stepped out of the shadows. Loki, with a mixture of feigned nonchalance and genuine, burning curiosity, approached the pedestal. There was no boast, no grand declaration, only a quiet, almost tentative reach. The court watched, their expressions ranging from amusement to pity. For if Thor, the mighty, could not lift it, what hope had the trickster prince? Loki's fingers, longer and more elegant than Thor's, closed around the leather-bound handle. A collective, dismissive sigh rippled through the assembled gods. But before it could fully settle, an impossible thing happened. A faint, internal hum began, almost imperceptible at first, growing into a gentle, resonant thrum that vibrated through the very stones of the hall. A soft, golden light, not the harsh crackle of a storm, but a warm, internal glow emanated from within Mjolnir. And then, with a quiet grace that defied all expectations, with no apparent strain or effort, Loki lifted the hammer, slowly, steadily. It rose from its cushion into his hand, shimmering with an energy that felt both familiar and utterly alien. The hall fell utterly, profoundly silent. Thor's face, previously angry, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Odin's eyes, usually so impassive, widened fractionally. Loki stood there, Mjolnir held aloft, not in triumph, but in a dawning realization. The weight of the hammer was not physical, but existential, a burden of unexpected worthiness. The golden light bathed him, highlighting the subtle curve of a smile playing on his lips, a look of profound surprise, and a hint of something deeper, something akin to destiny, beginning to unfold. From his position in the dappled shadows, Loki's gaze, usually sharp with veiled amusement, now held a deeper, more complex hue. He observed Thor's defeated retreat, the heavy silence of the hall amplifying his brother's quiet shame. A subtle tremor ran through Loki, not of fear, but of an unfamiliar yearning. He had always craved recognition, a measure of his own worth in the eyes of his father, in the eyes of Asgard. This moment, this unexpected vacuum of worthiness, presented an opportunity so profound, so utterly unforeseen, that it stilled even his restless mind. He considered the hammer not as a blunt instrument of power, but as a symbol of something more elusive, acceptance. His approach was not the bold, confident march of a hero, but a measured, almost delicate progression, as if testing the very air around the sacred relic. He reached the pedestal, his form slight against the immense, immovable presence of Mjolnir. Unlike Thor, who had grasped the handle with a warrior's intent, Loki's hand extended with an unusual tenderness. His fingers, long and elegant, paused just above the leather-wrapped grip, hovering for a moment in a gesture that was more inquiry than assertion. He did not pull or strain or even clench. Instead, his fingertips, cool and hesitant, simply rested upon the smooth, ancient metal of the hammer's handle. The gentle light intensified, weaving delicate patterns around Loki's fingers, a silent acknowledgement of worthiness that defied all conventional understanding. Then, without a struggle, without a grunt of effort, Mjolnir stirred. It rose from its velvet cushion, not with a sudden, forceful jerk, but with a smooth, almost leisurely ascent, as if floating on an unseen current. It lifted into the air, perfectly balanced, cradled within Loki's delicate grip. There was no thunderclap, no roaring gale, only an astonished silence that settled over the entire hall, profound and absolute. Loki himself seemed to falter for a moment, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, potent awe. His fingertips, cool and hesitant, simply rested upon the smooth, ancient metal of the hammer's handle. A breath held across the silent hall. No great clang, no sudden spark, but a quiet, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the vast hall. A low thrum that vibrated not through the stone, but through the very air. A deep, resonant hum that seemed to originate from the hammer itself. A faint warmth, like the last embers of a distant star, spread from the polished grip, gently warming Loki's pale skin. It was not a heat of defiance, nor of refusal, but a slow, tender awakening. The hammer, long inert, dormant on its pedestal, had acknowledged the touch. The hum deepened, vibrating now not just through the air, but through Loki's very bones, a symphony of ancient power awakening. And then, with a grace that defied its immense weight, Mjolnir stirred, not a violent jolt, but a slow, majestic ascent. The polished head, adorned with its age-old script, began to lift, inch by deliberate inch, from the ornate pedestal. The dark shadow it had cast for so long now shrunk, leaving the stone beneath barren and bare. It hovered, suspended in the space between the pedestal and Loki's palm, a silent testament to an unexpected truth. With a newfound certainty, a quiet confidence replacing his earlier hesitation, Loki's fingers curled around the leather-wrapped grip of Mjolnir. The smooth metal, the aged leather, felt utterly natural in his hand, as if it had always belonged there. the hammer settled with a soft click, a subtle shift in weight that felt more like an embrace than a burden. A pulse of pure, raw energy, cool and invigorating, surged through his arm, up to his shoulder, and then spread throughout his entire being. It was not a chaotic rush, but a controlled, powerful flow, akin to a mighty river finding its destined course. The golden light of Mjolnir brightened, now confidently asserting its presence, and the faint green aura around Loki pulsed in harmonious rhythm with it, intertwining, becoming one. Mjolnir gently descended, nestling into Loki's outstretched palm with a sigh of ancient metal meeting skin. The weight was profound, yet not burdensome, as if it had always belonged there, a rush of energy, not chaotic or destructive, but deep and primal, flowed through his arm, settling into his very core. It was the whisper of thunder, the patient strength of mountains, a power that demanded not just might, but a profound, almost reverent understanding. Loki's expression, usually a mask of wry amusement, softened, a flicker of genuine wonder in his eyes as he felt the hammer's quiet, immense presence resonate with a part of him he rarely acknowledged. A faint, internal chime resonated through him, a feeling akin to a gentle query from the hammer itself. Loki instinctively thought of his usual pursuits, a minor illusion, a playful misdirection, but Mjolnir offered no immediate burst of green light. Instead, the warmth in his hand deepened, and a vision, soft as mist, brushed against his mind, not of personal gain, but of a distant, shimmering realm shrouded in a fleeting shadow, a quiet echo of a plea for aid. The hammer, it seemed, had its own counsel, guiding his thoughts away from mischief, towards something larger, something protective. From the high archway across the hall, a figure emerged, slow and deliberate. Odin, the Allfather, his single eye holding a depth of ancient wisdom, offered no grand pronouncements. He simply watched, his gaze fixed not just on Loki, but on the silent communion between the trickster and the legendary hammer. A faint, almost imperceptible nod from Odin, a gesture heavy with unspoken meaning, conveyed both surprise and an almost reluctant acceptance. The air around them remained still, but the weight of destiny now shifted, settled heavily upon Loki's shoulders, palpable as the hammer in his hand. Loki's fingers traced the runes on Mjolnir's handle, a deep hum resonating through his very bones. The vision from the hammer solidified, no longer a mere impression, but a gentle, unfolding panorama in his mind's eye. He saw a realm of towering crystalline spires, usually bathed in perpetual twilight, now choked by tendrils of ethereal shadow, slowly devouring the light. A silent tremor of distress emanated from this distant place, a profound sense of imbalance. Mjolnir's weight in his hand felt less like an object and more like a living extension, a quiet conductor of his thoughts, nudging him towards action with an undeniable, yet soothing urgency. A faint, almost imperceptible green aura, born from his own satyr magic, began to weave itself around the hammer's polished head, mingling with its inherent, nascent lightning. With a slow, deliberate breath, Loki accepted the hammer's silent counsel. His mind, usually sharp with stratagems of deceit, now felt a clear, guiding purpose. He lifted Mjolnir, not with a flourish, but with a steady, almost tender motion. The air around him shimmered, not with his usual playful illusions, but with a profound distortion of space. A swirling vortex of emerald and sapphire light, crackling with barely contained energy, began to tear open in the air before him, revealing glimpses of the imperiled crystalline spires and the encroaching shadow. It was an interdimensional gateway, not teleportation, but a precise, guided pathway. The hammer's power amplifying his own innate ability to bend the fabric of reality. The portal pulsed, its light casting dancing shadows across Loki's face, highlighting a new, uncharacteristic grimness. He stepped forward, not with haste, but with a measured grace, through the shimmering threshold. The air on the other side was frigid, thin, and heavy, with the scent of ancient dust and a subtle, unsettling decay. Before him stretched the crystalline spires, their sharp facets now dulled and scarred by the spreading tendrils of shadow. Above, the sky was a bruised purple, and from the deepening gloom, spectral shapes began to coalesce, indistinct but undeniably hostile, their movements slow and deliberate, a silent wave of encroaching malice. Mjolnir felt warm in his grip, a steadfast anchor in this desolate landscape. The gateway breathed before him, a slow, silent respiration of color and light. It was not a violent tear in reality, but a seamless weaving of one place into another, as if he had simply pulled back a curtain woven from starlight. The air that drifted from it was cool and carried the faintest scent of ozone and something crystalline, like the smell of a cave filled with amethysts after a rainstorm. Within its depths, the spires of that distant world turned slowly, their plight a silent, mournful symphony that only he, through the hammer's connection, could feel. The hum of Mjolnir was a constant, steadying presence against his palm, a low thrum that vibrated up his arm and settled in his chest, quieting the restless, chaotic whispers that usually filled the corners of his mind. Here, at the precipice of a duty he had never sought, there was only a profound, almost unnerving calm. Loki did not turn at once. He held the moment, the quiet hum of the hammer a counterpoint to the sudden, dissonant chord of his brother's arrival. The portal continued its silent swirl, a promise of purpose waiting. Slowly, with a grace that seemed heavier, more deliberate than his usual fluid movements, he pivoted. Thor stood 20 paces away, bathed in the soft, ambient light of the Asgardian twilight filtering into the armory. He was without his armor, dressed in simple leather tunic and breeches, which only made him seem more vulnerable, more raw. The silence stretched, thin and taut, laden with centuries of rivalry and affection, now twisted into something unrecognizable. The only sounds were the soft, hypnotic whisper of the gateway and the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer from the city's heart. Finally, Thor spoke again, his voice strained, each word a heavy stone he was forced to lift. How? It was not a demand for answers, but a hollow echo of his own shattered understanding. It is not a trinket to be stolen with your illusions, brother. It is part of me. Loki watched him, his expression unreadable. Thor's presence was a mirror, reflecting a past Loki had been trying to outrun. The hum of Mjolnir, usually a comfort, now felt like a spotlight, illuminating the green light of his old mischief that still clung to the edges of his being. He could feel the judgment, unspoken but heavy, from his brother. The gateway to the crystalline spires still pulsed, a silent witness, yet for a moment, the urgent need of that distant realm receded as the weight of his own history pressed in. He stood unmoving, the hammer's power a current through him, a power that demanded not just action, but truth. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, flickered behind his eyes. A Midgardian city under siege, not by frost giants or dark elves, but by illusions spun from his own resentful heart. The hammer in his hand, though vibrating with a new, heroic purpose, seemed to echo the phantom weight of a different scepter, one that had once commanded mindless armies. He could almost hear the distant, disembodied cries of those he had once terrorized, a silent chorus of past misdeeds. It was a stark reminder of the serpent he had once been, a shadow that stretched far longer than his own frame. Thor's gaze was not accusatory, but mournful, a quiet sadness that Loki found almost harder to bear than anger. It spoke of shared history, of betrayed trust, and of a future that had once seemed impossible for them both. The air grew still, heavy with unspoken questions about worthiness, about redemption, and about whether a god of lies could truly become a god of thunder. Mjolnir felt heavier, not physically, but with the immense responsibility it embodied, a stark contrast to the fleeting, selfish power he had once craved. The portal continued its patient swirl, a silent call to duty, urging him to move forward, away from the tangled threads of his past. The hum of Mjolnir, usually a comfort, now felt like a spotlight, illuminating the green light of his old mischief that still clung to the edges of his being. He could feel the judgment, unspoken but heavy, from his brother. The gateway to the crystalline spires still pulsed, a silent witness, yet for a moment the urgent need of that distant realm receded as the weight of his own history pressed in. He stood unmoving, the hammer's power a current through him, a power that demanded not just action, but truth. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, flickered behind his eyes, a Midgardian city under siege, not by frost giants or dark elves, but by illusions spun from his own resentful heart. The hammer in his hand, though vibrating with a new, heroic purpose, seemed to echo the phantom weight of a different scepter, one that had once commanded mindless armies. The armory's quiet gave way to a palpable tension, as if the air itself grew heavy with an impending storm from beyond Asgard. His gaze, once inward, now sharpened, scanning the shimmering vortex of the gateway as a sense of duty, unavoidable and immense, began to settle upon him. The shimmer intensified, coalescing into a swirling, opalescent void within the gateway's heart. Strange, crystalline fragments, like frozen starlight, began to drift through the portal, not gently, but with an unsettling, almost predatory grace. Mjolnir felt heavier, a warm, pulsing weight that grounded him even as the ethereal storm threatened to pull at his resolve. He could sense the enormity of what approached, a threat that transcended mere physical invasion, aiming to unravel the very threads of existence across realms. With a deep, measured breath, Loki stepped forward. The gateway enveloped him, its cold, swirling energies giving way to the vast, silent expanse of space beyond. He emerged not into a peaceful sky, but a celestial battlefield already alight with the distant, silent explosions of cosmic conflict. Nebulas pulsed with unnatural colors, and the crystalline fragments now revealed themselves as shards of a grander, shattered entity scattering through the void. He was no longer in the quiet armory, but at the very edge of a threatened realm. Mjolnir now fully ablaze with a protective aura, its thunder a silent promise in the vacuum of space. The weight of his past still lingered, a faint echo, but the urgency of the present, the desperate need for a defender, pulled him inexorably towards the chaos. His resolve hardened, the trickster's cunning now tempered by a hero's unwavering purpose. As he braced himself against the silent, swirling expanse of cosmic destruction, the shimmering gateway pulsed before Loki, a silent, cosmic wound slowly opening. He could feel the cold, sharp edges of the incoming threat, not just a physical force, yet something that sought to unmake the very fabric of existence. Mjolnir felt warm and heavy in his hand, a conduit of noble purpose. Yet even its immense power felt insufficient against the vast, unknown emptiness that beckoned from beyond the veil. A flicker of his old arrogance, a whisper of self-sufficiency, attempted to assert itself, but it was quickly quelled by the stark reality of the peril. His past misdeeds, the chaos he had sown, had always been born of a twisted desire for control, for recognition. Now, with Mjolnir's truth resonating through him, he understood that true strength lay not in solitary defiance, but in acknowledging the need for aid. The familiar, chaotic sprawl of Midgard lay beneath him, a stark contrast to the quiet grandeur of Asgard. He manifested on a desolate, rain-slicked skyscraper rooftop, the air thick with the metallic scent of a recent downpour. The distant city lights a blurred mosaic against the dark sky. Mjolnir, a warm, thrumming weight in his grip, seemed to hum with a subtle impatience. His arrival, as expected, did not go unnoticed. Moments later, the telltale hum of repulsor technology and the familiar thud of super soldier boots announced the inevitable. Silhouettes materialized from the deeper shadows of the adjacent buildings, cautious and formidable. The meeting, if it could be called that, took place in a stark, utilitarian room within the Avengers' familiar tower. The city's muted hum, a distant backdrop. The air was thick with unspoken history, a heavy shroud woven from Loki's past deceptions. Captain America stood firm, his expression a testament to unyielding moral fortitude, while Iron Man's helmeted gaze, though unreadable, radiated an intense skepticism. Loki, Mjolnir resting casually against his leg, a symbol of his newfound, yet still suspect, worthiness, allowed a faint, habitual smirk to play on his lips. It was a defense mechanism, a trick of the light to mask the genuine urgency that now resided within him. He began to speak, his voice carefully modulated, attempting to convey the immense, existential threat without resorting to theatrics. Knowing that every word would be weighed against the mountain of his past treachery, the crystalline fragments, the gateway's ominous hum, still echoed in his mind, urging a swift, truthful plea for alliance. The rain softened to a persistent drizzle, mirroring the cautious calm that settled over the rooftop. Loki stood unwavering, Mjolnir a beacon of soft, internal light in the twilight. The silhouettes of Iron Man and Captain America held their ground, their advanced tech and formidable presence radiating a silent, watchful challenge. No words were exchanged, no aggressive moves made. It was a moment of profound, shared stillness, a silent acknowledgement of the new, unpredictable force Loki had become. He could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the complex tapestry of doubt and nascent understanding that wove through their collective consciousness. A distinct, icy chill began to permeate the air, overriding the metallic tang of the rain. It was subtle at first, a whisper against his skin, then a deeper tremor within Mjolnir itself. Loki's gaze sharpened, moving beyond the immediate figures before him, towards the blurred, distant city skyline that now seemed insignificant. This cold was ancient, deep, and spoke of something far removed from Midgard's urban hum. It was the ancestral chill of Jotunheim, a resonance of his true birthright, and it carried with it a silent, dreadful urgency. The Mjolnir in his grip pulsed with a colder, bluer light, reacting to the encroaching signature. With a newfound clarity, Loki tightened his grip on Mjolnir. The hammer, now a true extension of his will, began to hum with a resonant, powerful energy. This was not a challenge to be met with cunning or illusion, but with direct, potent force. The silent standoff with the Avengers became a backdrop, their presence receding from the forefront of his mind as the deeper, cosmic imperative took hold. He raised Mjolnir, not in an act of aggression, but of profound purpose, a shimmering vortex, crackling with green arcane energy and sharp blue lightning, began to swirl before him, manifesting with a quiet intensity. The ancient cold deepened, no longer a mere whisper, but a palpable presence that began to crystallize on the rooftop's edges. Frost, like delicate, ephemeral lace, traced the metallic surfaces and the slick, dark puddles left by the rain. Mjolnir, gripped tightly in Loki's hand, resonated with an answering, vibrant blue, its light pushing back against the encroaching chill. It was a duel of ancestral energies, the ice of Jotunheim against the stormfire of Asgard, both within the very being of the god of mischief. His breath plumed softly in the frigid air, a physical manifestation of the internal war now brewing, a war he alone could truly feel. The distant city lights blurred further through the sudden, swirling mists that rose from the rooftop, bringing with them the faint, acrid scent of ozone and the deep, silent hum of something vast approaching. A fissure, impossibly thin and shimmering with an inner, crystalline light, began to spiderweb across the very air above the rooftop. It pulsed with the rhythm of distant, booming ice, a silent thunder that reverberated not in the ears, but deep within the bone. From its ethereal depths, faint, towering silhouettes began to coalesce, their forms indistinct yet undeniably massive, hinting at an army of glacial giants slowly manifesting into Midgardian reality. The icy wind howled now, a mournful song carrying forgotten echoes of frozen realms, stirring Loki's long hair and cape like a restless sea. He felt a deep, almost instinctual pull, a familiar echo of a home he had rejected, yet one that now demanded his attention, threatening the very world he had come to protect. Mjolnir flared, a defiant beacon, channeling not just lightning, but a potent, protective warmth that pushed back against the encroaching cold. His grip tightened, a silent vow passing through his mind. This realm, this path, was his to defend. As the first colossal, ice-forged hand breached the shimmering tier in reality, reaching towards the vulnerable cityscape, a familiar, desperate cry pierced the frigid air. Thor, he had arrived, perhaps drawn by the cosmic disturbance, his figure silhouetted against a distant building, weaponless and exposed. The giant's icy gaze, cold and ancient, shifted, locking onto the unprotected Asgardian without hesitation. A primal surge of brotherly protectiveness, long buried under layers of mischief and resentment, ignited within Loki. He moved, not with calculated trickery, but with the raw, unadulterated force of a protector. The ozone scent, once sharp with the threat of ancient ice and manifesting giants, gradually softened, dissolving into the crisp, clean air of the Midgardian night. Loki's fingers, which had so recently gripped Mjolnir with desperate strength, now rested almost tenderly upon its handle, feeling the deep, resonant hum that no longer thrummed with impending battle, but with a settled, unwavering warmth. The fissure in the sky, that terrifying wound through reality, had not merely closed. It had woven itself back into the fabric of the cosmos, leaving behind a sky of impossible clarity, dotted with stars that felt closer, brighter, almost benevolent. He stood not as a trickster king, nor a usurper, but as a sentinel. The hammer, once a symbol of his brother's might, was now an extension of his own complex identity, its power flowing through him, not overriding his essence, but refining it. He had faced down not just the threat of Jotunheim, but the very depths of his own self-doubt, his inherent need for recognition, and the gnawing bitterness of a perceived lesser status. Mjolnir had not demanded perfection, only worthiness, a worthiness that had blossomed in the crucible of defending a realm he had once delighted in tormenting. The chill wind still danced around him, but it no longer felt like the biting breath of a hostile realm. It was merely the cool sigh of a world settling into a peaceful slumber, confident in its unexpected guardian. A profound stillness descended upon the rooftop. The distant city hummed a gentle lullaby, and for the first time in an eternity, Loki felt a quiet, unwavering peace within his own heart. This new path, forged not in thunderous glory, but in quiet, complex choices resonated across the 9 realms. In Asgard, the absence of Mjolnir from Thor's hand was no longer a void of despair, but a catalyst for his own profound growth. The god of thunder, unburdened by the expectation of the hammer, had discovered a strength more intrinsic, a leadership more compassionate, and a wisdom born of humility. He had learned that true power lay not in the weapon, but in the heart that wielded purpose. Odin, the Allfather, watched these evolving dynamics with a gaze that held a new kind of pride, a quiet understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. His 2 sons, once locked in a bitter rivalry, had found their own distinct paths to honor, each bearing a unique, hard-earned worthiness. The throne of Asgard, though still Thor's birthright, was now protected by a unified front, a harmony born of difference, not conformity. Midgard, too, felt the subtle shift. Its protectors were no longer a simple dichotomy of good and evil, but a spectrum of intent and redemption. The Avengers, though initially wary, had come to recognize the transformed trickster, observing a vigilance and a cunning deployed for defense rather than disruption. It was a universe subtly recalibrated, where the lines of loyalty and duty were drawn with a finer, more intricate hand, painting a tapestry far richer than any singular prophecy could have foretold. The air seemed to hold a memory of the cosmic shift, a lingering whisper of destiny altered. And so, as the cosmic dust settled and the echoes of altered fates faded into the gentle hum of existence, a new legend quietly took root. It was not a tale of simple heroism, but of the profound, often arduous journey of self-discovery, of finding worth in the most unexpected corners of a conflicted soul. Loki, the god of mischief, had not merely wielded Mjolnir. He had allowed it to reshape him, not into a clone of his brother, but into a unique protector, one who understood the shadows because he had walked within them. The universe, in turn, had adapted, a testament to the idea that destiny is not immutable, but a canvas upon which even the most unlikely hands can paint a new truth. The soft glow of Mjolnir, whether glimpsed on a distant rooftop or felt as a protective warmth across realms, became a quiet beacon of this transformed reality. It was a testament that redemption was possible, and that even a heart once clouded by envy and spite could learn to champion light. Now, as the stars above continue their silent, endless dance, and the worlds below drift into their tranquil dreams, we leave this alternate Midgard under the steady, if unconventional, guardianship of its god of hammers, a world cradled not by the storm of a straightforward hero, but by the nuanced, enduring vigilance of a reformed trickster, his gaze forever fixed on the fragile balance of existence Close your eyes now and let the quiet strength of this reborn guardian usher you into a peaceful night. The crimson glow of the burning Bifrost Bridge painted the horizon, a fiery scar against the twilight sky of Asgard. Yet, even amidst the roaring inferno that threatened to consume their golden realm, a strange calm settled around Loki. Mjolnir, clutched firmly in his gloved hand, pulsed with a steady, deep thrum, not the wild crackle of raw power, but a contained resonance, like a sleeping giant about to stir. He stood atop a crumbled battlement, his gaze sweeping across the chaos below, a meticulous calculation in his emerald eyes. This was not the chaotic destruction he once sought to inflict, but a brutal, inevitable tide he now stood against. His magic, a shimmering green aura, began to intertwine subtly with the hammer's faint blue glow, a nascent symphony of power preparing to meet the encroaching doom. No grand, thunderous shout escaped his lips, no desperate plea for aid. Instead, Loki raised Mjolnir, not in a defiant roar, but with a deliberate, almost graceful arc. The air around him shimmered, not just with lightning, but with intricate jade sigils that expanded outwards, weaving themselves into the very fabric of the approaching storm clouds. The hammer became a conduit, not merely for celestial lightning, but for a fusion of elemental wrath and arcane precision. Green energies danced with azure sparks, coalescing into a shimmering, resilient barrier that began to push back against the fiery advance of Surtur's hordes. It was a defense born of foresight, not just brute force, a trickster's answer to a direct assault, twisting the inevitable into a momentary reprieve. Even as the barrier held, straining against the immense pressure, a flicker of something ancient crossed Loki's face, not fear, but a profound understanding. He remembered the whispered tales of prophecy, the inevitability of this day, and the part he was always meant to play, albeit a different one now. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a ghost of his old self, but one now tempered by the weight of Mjolnir's purpose. He glanced briefly skyward, where a new kind of thunder rumbled, a deep, resonant sound that felt familiar, yet distinctly his own. This was his Ragnarok, and he would meet it, not as a villain, nor merely as a king's son, but as Asgard's complicated, unexpected champion, weaving destiny with every strike and spell. The shimmering barrier held, a testament to a cunning defense. Beyond it, the fiery advance faltered, the monstrous figures of Surtur's legions momentarily pushed back into the churning shadows. A silence, deep and profound, descended upon the ravaged landscape of Asgard, broken only by the distant crackle of dying flames, and the soft hum of Mjolnir in Loki's steady grip. His gaze, still sharp, softened slightly as he took in the reprieve. The scarred earth beneath his feet, a stark reminder of the battle just waged, and the one still awaiting. The green sigils on the barrier slowly faded, leaving only the faint blue glow of the hammer's power, a promise of continued vigilance. As the immediate threat receded, Loki felt Mjolnir's hum shift, not a call to battle, but a deeper resonance, echoing through the very bedrock of Asgard. He looked upon the realm, not with the calculating ambition of old, but with a nascent sense of responsibility. The Golden City, though wounded, still pulsed with life. Where fiery scars had marred the land, a faint, almost imperceptible green energy, an echo of his own magic, seemed to seep from the ground, subtly encouraging repair. This was not just about wielding power, but about nurturing, about weaving resilience into the very fabric of existence. A truth Mjolnir seemed to whisper to him with every pulse. A shadow fell across the crumbled battlement, not of threat, but of familiar presence. Thor stood there, no longer clad in his usual battle fury, but with a weary, knowing look in his eyes. He observed Loki, Mjolnir still at his side, and the quiet testament of the defended realm. No words were exchanged, no boast, no challenge. Instead, a simple nod passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of a destiny irrevocably altered, and a bond reforged in the fires of necessity. The air between them, once thick with rivalry, now held a fragile peace, a recognition of separate strengths, now working toward a common, shared purpose for the survival of what remained. The deep hum of Mjolnir vibrated through Loki's hand, no longer a battle roar, but a resonant chord echoing the very pulse of Asgard beneath his feet. It was a language he was only just learning, a whisper of life force rather than raw might. His gaze swept over the shattered remnants of Surtur's fury, the scorch marks on the ancient golden pavements, the fractured spires of distant towers. But beneath the destruction, a faint luminescence, verdant and ethereal, began to bloom. It was an outward manifestation of his own arcane energies, now subtly amplified and directed by the hammer's innate connection to the realm. The earth itself seemed to sigh, a collective exhale of relief, as tendrils of soft green light began to mend hairline fractures in the stone, an almost imperceptible breath of healing across the wounded land. This was Mjolnir's wisdom, patiently revealing a path not of conquest, but of profound care. This new power was not the destructive force of lightning or the raw impact of a hammer, but something far more intricate, a weaver's touch. Loki found himself instinctively guiding the delicate green energies. Mjolnir, a perfectly tuned conductor for this unexpected symphony of restoration. He knelt, one hand resting lightly on a shattered column, the other still gripping Mjolnir, its blue light a steady beacon. The verdant glow intensified, not with a burst of power, but with a slow, deliberate bloom, tracing the fragmented edges of the stone, coaxing them back into cohesion. Small cracks in the fluted marble seemed to draw together, the faint lines disappearing, as if time itself were flowing backward. It was a painstaking process, subtle and patient, yet undeniably effective. A trickster's precision applied not to deception, but to the meticulous art of mending. He felt a quiet satisfaction, unfamiliar yet potent, as a section of the column shimmered, regaining its former integrity. The soft hum of Mjolnir deepened further, resonating not just within Loki, but across the expanse of Asgard. He rose, turning his gaze towards the horizon, where the golden city, though still bearing the scars of battle, now shimmered with an almost imperceptible, revitalized glow. It was a silent acknowledgement from the realm itself, a quiet embrace of its unlikely protector. The weight of the hammer in his hand felt different now, less a weapon, more a shepherd's staff. Mjolnir had once sought out a hero of pure heart and strength, but in Loki, it had found a different kind of worthiness, a mind capable of intricate solutions, a heart slowly opening to the profound duty of care, and a spirit willing to twist destiny into a path of healing. The wind, carrying the scent of rain and earth, seemed to whisper ancient secrets, speaking of a long-forgotten accord between ruler and realm, now reawakened. Loki, the god of mischief, was becoming something more, something entirely new, the weaver of worlds, perhaps, or simply Asgard's quiet protector. The quiet satisfaction deepened, evolving into something more profound as Loki moved beyond the single column. He drifted towards a towering archway, its once grand sweep now a jagged, broken maw against the twilight sky. Mjolnir felt less like a weapon and more like a divining rod, humming with a subtle energy that resonated with the wounded stones. The verdant light, no longer just mending, began to pulse, a steady, rhythmic beat mirroring the life force beneath the fractured earth. Loki realized this was not merely physical repair. He was coaxing the very spirit of the realm to reawaken, weaving arcane energies with the hammer's innate connection to Asgard's foundation. Each shard of light he directed into the cracks felt like a whispered word of comfort to a sleeping giant. With each successive mend, a gentle sigh seemed to ripple across the landscape. The very air around him grew lighter, shedding the heavy dust and sorrow of Surtur's destruction, replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible fragrance of fresh earth and ancient stone. As the green energies infused the ground beneath the restored arch, Loki noticed something remarkable. Tiny, resilient shoots of flora, impossibly vibrant, began to unfurl from between the newly joined flagstones. They were not grand, but delicate, their verdant hues a stark contrast to the scorched earth that still stretched further afield. This wasn't merely repairing stone, it was coaxing life itself back from the brink. A tender rebirth he hadn't anticipated, a testament to the hammer's deepest, most ancient wisdom. A new kind of warmth spread through Loki, not the searing heat of battle or the chill of his usual magic, but a deep, pervasive comfort that seemed to emanate from the very core of Asgard. It flowed through Mjolnir and into his own being, a reciprocal exchange of energy. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the gentle hum of the hammer guide him. The subtle whispers of the land, once a distant murmur, grew clearer. Almost a language he could understand, ancient cries of neglect, faint hopes of renewal, deep-seated scars, invisible to the eye, but resonant to the worthy touch. He found himself not just directing the power, but listening, allowing the realm itself to subtly guide his hand towards areas of deepest spiritual and physical wound. Understanding that Mjolnir was not merely an instrument of power, but a conductor of empathy, Loki watched the delicate shoots unfurl, no longer mere repairs, but a resurgence of nature itself. The verdant glow from Mjolnir pulsed, mirroring the burgeoning life beneath his feet. He saw how the tiny tendrils reached out, intertwining with the newly whole stone, drawing sustenance from the revitalized earth. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible growth, yet profound, a slow awakening of forgotten vitality. The air carried a whisper of growth, a faint, sweet aroma of damp soil and budding leaves, replacing the acrid scent of ash. He realized the hammer wasn't just fixing things, it was reminding Asgard what it once was, nudging it back towards its inherent splendor, not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of tenderness. This wasn't merely a trick, it was a profound truth, unveiled by the hammer's touch, drawn by an unseen current. Loki moved towards the shattered remnants of the Rainbow Bridge's initial span, a place where Surtur's fury had left an irreparable scar. Here, the destruction was raw, vast, and uncompromising. He extended Mjolnir, the green light now suffused with faint, swirling golden motes, reaching out like roots into the very fabric of the broken Bifrost. Instead of merely patching, the hammer began to reweave, pulling fractured light strands back into cohesion, not just of stone, but of pure, crystalline energy. He felt the immense power required, a drain he hadn't experienced before, but also a growing understanding of the bridge's true nature as a conduit, not just a path. This was a challenge on a grander scale, requiring a depth of focus that pushed his trickster mind to new limits of methodical concentration. As the fragments of the Bifrost slowly reknitted, a subtle change began to manifest in the heavens above. The bruised, perpetual twilight that had shrouded Asgard since Surtur's rampage began to recede, replaced by a softer, almost hopeful hue. Streaks of rose and lavender painted the distant horizon, a hint of dawn Loki hadn't seen since before the devastation. The air, once still and heavy, now carried a faint, whispering breeze, a gentle caress across his face. He felt the realm sigh, not in resignation, but in nascent relief, as if a great weight had been subtly lifted from its weary shoulders. This wasn't just structural repair, it was an emotional balm, a promise of renewal reflected in the very sky. The fractured light strands of the Bifrost began to hum, a soft, resonant frequency that vibrated through Loki's very being. Mjolnir, in his grasp, felt less like a tool and more like an extension of his will, channeling the raw energy into a patient, deliberate reconstruction. He guided the swirling golden motes, encouraging them to interlace, forming shimmering threads that slowly mended the gaping wound in the bridge's crystalline structure. The process was slow, methodical, demanding a complete surrender to the rhythm of creation. A state of focused calm he rarely allowed himself. He felt the immense, gentle pulse of the hammer, a quiet whisper of purpose guiding his hand, not forcing it. Each rewoven strand glowed with a nascent light, a testament to the bridge's true nature as a conduit of pure cosmic energy, now being patiently coaxed back to life, molecule by delicate molecule. The air around him shimmered with the newly coalescing energy, warm and faintly sweet, like ozone after a distant, gentle storm. As the delicate tendrils of light and energy solidified, a segment of the bridge, once utterly sundered, began to regain its structural integrity. Glowing with an inner luminescence, the hum deepened, becoming a steady, comforting thrum that resonated within the very stone beneath Loki's feet. He felt a profound drain, a gentle ebb of his own magical reserves. Yet it was not debilitating. Instead, it was a sensation of reciprocal exchange, as if Mjolnir drew from him only what was needed, replenishing itself with the cosmic energy it was now directing. A soft, vibrant glow, a purer form of the bridge's original brilliance, began to spread, pushing back the shadows of destruction. The newly formed surface felt smooth and cool beneath his touch, no longer jagged and broken, but seamlessly reformed, vibrating with latent power, a testament to Mjolnir's capacity for gentle restoration. He could almost hear the bridge sighing in relief as the final threads locked into place, completing that initial span. The green and golden light from Mjolnir softened, pulsating with a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Loki, though physically weary, felt an awakening within his own mind, a deeper connection not just to the hammer, but to the very essence of Asgard. He now understood that the Bifrost was more than just a path between realms. It was a living artery, a conduit of vital cosmic energy, and its repair was not merely structural, but energetic, a healing of Asgard's connection to the universe. Mjolnir had guided him to this understanding, urging him to look beyond the surface of destruction to the underlying currents of life and power. He saw how the hammer seemed to draw upon not only his own inherent magic, but also the latent energy of the realms themselves. A vast, gentle power he had never truly acknowledged before. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread from Mjolnir into his hand. A quiet affirmation, a profound stillness settled upon the Bifrost. Loki took a slow, deliberate step back, Mjolnir still warm and resonant in his grip. The newly reformed segment of the bridge pulsed with a vibrant, inner luminescence, no longer merely repaired, but reborn, imbued with a deeper, more resilient energy. He traced the shimmering, seamless surface with his gaze, a quiet sense of awe mingling with the residual exhaustion. The immense cosmic canvas stretched before him, a tapestry of swirling nebulae and distant, twinkling stars. Mjolnir felt different now, less a weapon to command, and more an ancient heart beating in unison with his own, its power flowing through him, not as a surge, but as a steady, patient river. He inhaled the cool, clean air of space, feeling the vast silence press in, and for a fleeting moment, the usual clamor of his own mind receded, replaced by a singular, unburdened clarity. With a deep, cleansing breath, Loki turned from the cosmic expanse, the weight of Mjolnir a comfortable, familiar presence. His footsteps echoed softly on the golden path leading away from the Bifrost, back towards the shimmering spires of Asgard. The city of gold glowed gently in the distance, a beacon of home and ancient power. He walked with a newfound measured pace, his usual mischievous swagger replaced by a more thoughtful stride. Each step seemed to carry not just his own form, but the quiet resonance of the hammer, a subtle thrum that vibrated up through the very stones beneath his boots. The grand, arching hallways of Asgard's palace stretched before him, silent and majestic, their surfaces catching the muted, internal light of the realm, casting long, peaceful shadows. He felt the subtle shift in the air, a sense of expectation, not from others, but from within himself, as if Mjolnir had awakened something long dormant. He found his way to a secluded chamber, a space usually reserved for quiet contemplation of ancient texts and forgotten lore. The room was bathed in the soft, amber glow of enchanted lamps. The only sound the faint, distant hum of Asgard itself. Loki gently laid Mjolnir upon a heavy, polished table, its polished metal reflecting the subdued light with a quiet dignity. His gaze lingered on the hammer, no longer seeing merely a powerful tool, but a mirror reflecting a potential he had only ever glimpsed in others. He sat, the silence profound, and allowed the true magnitude of his worthiness to settle upon him. A complex mixture of quiet pride, daunting responsibility, and a strange, unfamiliar peace. This was not the power of deceit or manipulation, but something purer, more elemental. The path ahead was no longer one of shadowed ambition, but of conscious choice, a heavy, yet surprisingly serene burden he was only just beginning to understand. A profound stillness settled upon Loki as he stepped further into the royal chambers. The usual murmur of court life, the distant clang of smiths, the echoes of laughter or argument, all seemed hushed, absorbed by the thick, golden walls. He found himself listening to the rhythm of his own breath, a steady, measured cadence that felt alien, and yet perfectly natural. The weight of Mjolnir, once an impossible fantasy, now anchored him, not just physically, but spiritually, to the very stones beneath his feet. There was no deception required here, no intricate lie to weave, no shadow to cast. Just the simple, undeniable truth of his presence and the hammer's acceptance. As he drifted deeper into the palace, a muted amber glow from a distant alcove drew his attention. There, etched into a colossal golden frieze, was a depiction of Odin, his singular eye glowing with ancient wisdom, bestowing his blessing upon a young, boisterous Thor, hammer already in hand. The image pulsed with a heroic light, yet Loki felt no familiar sting of bitterness or the urge to obscure it. Instead, a quiet, almost melancholic understanding bloomed within him. He saw the genuine, uncomplicated joy in Thor's youthful face, the untainted zeal for battle and honor, and for the first time understood it without the bitter prism of his own thwarted ambition. The memory of his brother's triumphant roars, the thunderous impact of Mjolnir on distant battlefields, now felt like echoes of a different timeline, a path not taken by either of them. His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around Mjolnir's leather-wrapped handle. A soft, blue-white light, barely perceptible to an outsider, pulsed gently from the hammer's head, responding to the subtle shift in his inner intent. It wasn't a crackling, aggressive energy for storm or battle, but a gentle emanation, like captured starlight or deep-sea phosphorescence. He He lifted the hammer slowly, deliberately, not swinging it in a show of force, but raising it to meet his eye level with a quiet reverence. The ancient runes carved into its surface, once just intriguing arcane symbols, now seemed to thrum with a quiet, sentient awareness, whispering not of raw power, but of the profound purpose they embodied. He felt a deeper connection, a bond more profound and true than any spell he had ever woven. The golden frieze, once a source of bitter contemplation, now receded into a mere historical marker. Loki moved slowly. The soft, cushioned carpets of the royal hall muffling his footsteps. Each step, though light, felt imbued with a new, grounding weight from Mjolnir. He no longer felt the need to flit through shadows or rely on illusions to command attention. The hammer, resting against his leg, hummed with a deep, resonant energy, a constant, low thrum that vibrated through the very air. It wasn't a demand, but an offering of purpose, a quiet reassurance of strength that transcended mere physical might. He paused before a grand, arched doorway, its surface adorned with intricate carvings depicting the world tree, Yggdrasil, its roots burrowing into unknown realms. Beyond it lay the royal archives, a vast, echoing space dedicated to the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of Asgard. Here he felt no rush, no urge to manipulate or deceive. Instead, a genuine curiosity, a thirst for understanding, settled upon him. He passed between towering shelves of ancient scrolls and thick, leather-bound tomes, their pages brittle with age, their contents filled with sagas of old heroes and cosmic lore. Mjolnir, still in his grasp, seemed to resonate with the silent history surrounding them, its faint hum intensifying. As if recognizing the echoes of its own past within these hallowed halls, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the dusty cover of a particularly massive tome, bound in dark leather and clasped with bronze. As his touch made contact, a faint tremor ran through Mjolnir, and a subtle crackle of green energy, distinctly his own, intertwined with a gentle, golden spark emanating from the hammer. It was emerging, not a clash. His innate satyr, his trickster magic, usually sharp and manipulative, now felt softened, imbued with a new kind of resonance. It wasn't weaker, but different, flowing with a broader, more protective current. He focused on the ancient script on the book's spine, and a flash of insight, clear and unbidden, unfurled in his mind. His gaze drifted over illuminated manuscripts and intricate runic etchings, each a whisper from a bygone era. Mjolnir, usually a silent, steadfast companion, began to vibrate with a more pronounced energy, its low thrum deepening as Loki approached a recessed alcove. Here, nestled amongst less ornate scrolls, lay a single, plain leather-bound volume, seemingly unremarkable, yet radiating an ancient power that resonated with the hammer in his hand. Loki reached out, his fingers tracing the worn, unadorned cover. There was no title, no embellishment, only the faint indentation of an almost forgotten symbol, a swirling vortex that seemed to draw the light into itself as his hand made contact. A soft, green glow emanated from his fingertips, briefly mingling with the faint blue crackle that now pulsed from Mjolnir. As the tome yielded to his touch, its pages did not reveal dense script, but rather shimmered with shifting light, forming ephemeral images that danced before his eyes. It was a history told through sensation, a chronicle of the 9 realms witnessed from a perspective he had never considered. He saw not tales of glorious conquest, but quiet acts of protection, of small, selfless choices made in the face of overwhelming odds. He perceived the true weight of stewardship, the silent burden of foresight, and the difficult decisions made not for glory, but for survival. Mjolnir's hum intensified, resonating with each image, a silent affirmation. He saw the hammer in the hands of various beings throughout the cosmos, not just warriors, but healers, thinkers, and guardians of fragile truths. The last image faded, leaving behind not emptiness, but a quiet resonance within Loki. He slowly closed the ancient volume, its light receding, leaving the alcove once more in gentle shadow. Mjolnir, which had pulsed with such intensity, now settled into a comfortable, almost symbiotic stillness against his leg. It no longer felt like a powerful object he merely wielded, but an extension of his own newly centered being, its weight a grounding force. He moved away from the alcove, the soft carpets of the archives absorbing his footsteps, but his presence felt different. The habitual restlessness, the gnawing hunger for recognition, had softened, replaced by a nascent sense of responsibility. The final image faded, leaving Loki standing amidst the ancient knowledge, the weight of a cosmos not on his shoulders, but in his very soul. Mjolnir, once a symbol of brute strength, now felt like a repository of gentle resilience, its constant thrum a quiet pulse against his palm. He perceived the silent sacrifices, the unseen burdens, the wisdom of restraint over conquest. The swirling vortex symbol from the tome's cover seemed to etch itself into his mind, no longer a mere mark, but a pathway to a different kind of power. This was not the clamor of battle, but the enduring strength of guardianship, a power he had always mocked, yet now understood with a profound, almost aching clarity. The green light around his fingers diminished, but a faint, internal glow remained, a nascent spark of something new and unfamiliar within him, resonating with the hammer's steady beat. The vast chamber, once just a library, now felt like a living entity, its knowledge breathing around him. A gentle shift in the air stirred the dust motes, catching the ambient light and sending them dancing like ephemeral spirits. Loki closed the plain leather-bound volume, the act echoing a closing of one chapter and the hesitant opening of another within himself. There was no grand pronouncement, no sudden flash of insight, but a deep, quiet understanding that settled into his bones. The desire for mischief, the thrill of deception, still flickered, but it was now tempered by a profound sense of responsibility. A silent, unasked for burden that Mjolnir, resting solidly in his grip, seemed to confirm with its unwavering hum. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over the hallowed shelves, seeing not just books, but countless tales of forgotten valor and understated heroism. A heritage he was now, impossibly, bound to. With the tome carefully returned to its alcove, Loki took a deep, measured breath, the weight of the hammer a grounding presence in his hand. He stepped away from the recessed nook, the grand, echoing silence of the archive following him. Each step brought him closer to the entrance, a subtle transformation etched into his bearing. His typical swagger was replaced by a more deliberate, almost hesitant stride. Mjolnir felt like an extension of himself, not a borrowed power, but a truth uncovered. The air outside the archive, in the long, ornate hallway of Asgard, felt subtly different, clearer, as if a veil had been lifted from his perception. The usual vibrant gold and grand tapestries seemed to hum with an underlying energy, mirroring the quiet hum of the hammer, beckoning him towards a path he had never envisioned, a path of honest purpose. Loki stood amidst the hushed reverence of the Asgardian royal library, the weight of Mjolnir in his hand, no longer a surprise, but a grounding presence. The faint hum of the hammer thrummed through his arm, a steady rhythm that spoke of eons and duties. He traced the ancient runes etched into its surface, a pattern of power he now felt intimately connected to. The very air around him seemed to deepen, the scholarly scent of aged parchment, and dust now mingling with a faint, crisp aroma of ozone, an almost imperceptible promise of distant storms gathering at his call. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a contemplative stillness, eyes distant, as if seeing beyond the present walls. The library itself seemed to respond to his presence, the ambient magical energies within its walls subtly aligning with the potent force now residing in Loki's hand. Dust motes, caught in stray shafts of light, swirled in tiny, slow eddies, almost like miniature galaxies forming and dissipating. The ancient tomes on their shelves, normally static and silent, seemed to breathe with a collective, barely audible sigh, a deeper resonance echoing the hammer's low thrum. It was as if the very knowledge contained within these walls, once merely observed, was now an active participant in his evolving destiny. A silent counsel offering its wisdom without a single whispered word. With a slow, deliberate motion, Loki lifted Mjolnir, the familiar weight now an extension of his own will, not a burden. He did not test its strength with a casual swing, but instead, with a gentle, almost reverent touch, he extended his arm, the air around the hammer shimmering, a faint, internal crackle of energy, too subtle for the ear, but palpable to the soul, radiated outwards. It was a silent conversation between him and the ancient weapon, a shared understanding of power and purpose. The light around him brightened just a fraction, a muted emerald corona outlining his form, hinting at the vast, untamed potential he now commanded. Loki's fingers, once so adept at conjuring illusions and twisting truths, now found a strange comfort in the worn leather and brittle pages of a nearby volume. He didn't open it, merely letting his fingertips brush over its spine, feeling the faint, lingering magic within. Mjolnir pulsed gently in his other hand, a steady counterpoint to the quiet hum of the library itself. He thought of all the grand pronouncements, the promises of glory, the ceaseless striving for attention that had defined his past. This felt different. Not a performance, but a profound, undeniable truth resonating from the hammer, through his arm, and into the very core of his being. A soft, resonant thrum from Mjolnir intensified, guiding his gaze. His eyes settled on a particular alcove, shrouded in a faint, emerald glow that seemed to emanate not from the shelves, but from the air itself. It was a section rarely disturbed, containing records of cosmic phenomena, of the delicate balance between realms, and the ancient treaties that bound them. As he drifted towards it, his steps light and silent, the scent of ozone grew stronger, no longer faint, but a distinct, invigorating aroma. He paused before a pedestal, upon which rested a single, unbound scroll, its parchment appearing impossibly old, yet radiating a vibrant, protective energy. His gaze lingered on the scroll, then drifted to the faint, ethereal patterns woven into the fabric of the alcove's walls. Constellations that weren't quite right, swirling nebulae that hinted at pathways between dimensions. He reached out, not with intent to deceive or manipulate, but with a quiet, almost reverent curiosity, drawn by an ancient, potent wisdom that seemed to hum in harmony with Mjolnir. His fingers, usually so quick to grasp and manipulate, hesitated above the scroll. parchment seemed to ripple faintly, as if anticipating his touch, yet offering no immediate resistance. It was less a physical object and more a conduit, a repository of narratives woven not with ink, but with the very fabric of the cosmos. Through the scroll, or perhaps through Mjolnir's influence, Loki felt a sudden, profound awareness of the vastness beyond Asgard's walls. He saw, not with his eyes, but with a deep, intuitive sense, distant suns being born and dying, the silent drift of asteroid fields, the rhythmic pulse of alien civilizations across the 9 realms. The weight of Mjolnir in his hand grew heavier, then lighter, as if fluctuating with the immense scale of the responsibility it represented. As Loki's fingertips made contact with the ancient scroll, a silent tremor passed through the parchment. It wasn't the coarse touch of old paper, but a surface that felt cool and almost alive, humming softly against his skin. A faint, internal warmth spread from the point of contact, seeping into his arm, not invasive, but an inviting current of information. The emerald glow of the alcove seemed to pulse in time with this new resonance, and Mjolnir, in his other hand, offered a steady, comforting thrum that echoed the ancient parchment's wisdom. He didn't read words or symbols, but felt a complex tapestry of cosmic energies, delicate balances, and the invisible threads that wove the realms together, unfolding in his mind with crystalline clarity. The subtle energy exchange intensified, and the ethereal patterns woven into the alcove's walls, once merely decorative or symbolic, now shimmered with an active, internal light. Constellations shifted and flowed, no longer static star charts, but dynamic, interweaving pathways between dimensions, their faint outlines appearing to ripple. The swirling nebulae coalesced into discernible bridges, faint, shimmering threads connecting realms that Loki had only ever perceived through tales or his own illusions. He saw the intricate architecture of the cosmos, not as a distant, abstract concept, but as a living, breathing entity, fragile and interconnected. The library itself felt larger, infused with an unseen, potent force that had always been there, waiting to be truly perceived. The scroll, he realized, wasn't merely a record. It was a living key, a blueprint for the delicate balance of the 9 realms and the pathways that connected them. It spoke of ancient treaties, not of conquest or dominance, but of mutual guardianship and the sacred responsibility of maintaining order, a concept far removed from the grand pronouncements of glory he had once chased. Mjolnir felt heavier, no longer just a source of power, but a tool of immense responsibility, resonating with a deep, protective hum that seemed to pledge itself to the scroll's truth. His past self, the schemer and trickster, felt like a distant echo in the quiet sanctity of this moment, replaced by a nascent, unwavering sense of purpose. To uphold this fragile, cosmic order, the wisdom was not merely understood, but felt, a profound, undeniable truth settling into his very being. The intricate cosmic architecture Loki perceived began to weave itself not just into his sight, but into the very fabric of his consciousness. It was more than knowledge, it was a profound resonance, a deep understanding of the hidden currents that flowed between the 9 realms and beyond. He felt the pull of distant stars, not as mere gravitational forces, but as anchors of immense, ancient energies, each a silent sentinel in the vast ocean of existence. The whisper of the scroll, once a faint rustle, became a resounding symphony of creation, each note a world born, a destiny unfolding, vibrating through his very bones. Mjolnir, held firmly in his grasp, responded with an increasingly steady, almost paternal thrum, its internal storm of power calming to a gentle, constant pulse that synchronized precisely with his own heartbeat. A reassuring presence, the weight of the hammer, once merely physical, now felt imbued with an ethical gravity, a silent, profound promise of protection that subtly shifted the balance of his own intentions, guiding his thoughts towards stewardship rather than mischief. As the ancient wisdom from the scroll intertwined seamlessly with the raw, elemental power of Mjolnir, Loki felt a profound and undeniable fusion occurring within his very being. His inherent satyr, his magic of illusion and trickery, began to flow differently. No longer a separate, self-serving current, but a magnificent tributary feeding into a vast, powerful river of cosmic force, expanding his magical potential far beyond his previous understanding. The emerald green of his arcane energy, usually sharp and distinctly defined, softened at its edges, gracefully bleeding into the rich, golden hue that emanated from the hammer, creating shimmering, iridescent patterns that danced just beneath his skin, like silent aurora borealis. This wasn't merely an addition of power, a simple accumulation. It was a fundamental realignment, a complete reforging of his essence, his very soul. He felt the universe's delicate balance, not just intellectually as a concept, but emotionally, viscerally. The consequences of disruption now resonating deep within him, stirring a sense of profound responsibility he had so skillfully avoided for eons. A weight he now willingly began to bear. His hands, one still resting gently on the cool, vibrant parchment that hummed beneath his touch, the other clasping the steady, warm grip of Mjolnir, became perfect conduits for this grand synthesis, perfectly attuned to the cosmic symphony. A quiet sigh escaped Loki's lips, a sound of release and profound acceptance as the integration reached a harmonious peak. His eyes, usually gleaming with cunning, now held a deeper, almost melancholic wisdom, reflecting the vastness he had just absorbed. It wasn't a sadness, but the serene weight of understanding, a recognition of the intricate burdens of cosmic power. Then, a subtle manifestation, not a chaotic burst, but a gentle ripple of energy emanating from him, causing the air itself to shimmer, distorting the ancient bookshelves for a fleeting moment, as if seen through heated air. A faint, almost imperceptible crackle of blue-white energy, like static electricity dancing on velvet, traced the contours of Mjolnir, not threatening, but a soft, steady hum of latent power. The cosmic symphony, which had just swept through Loki, settled into a sustained, resonant hum. His awareness expanded, no longer tethered solely to his own cunning or desires, but stretching outward, brushing against the faint echoes of distant realms, perceiving the delicate interplay of forces that bound them together. The weight of Mjolnir in his grasp now felt less like an object and more like an extension of his own consciousness, a living entity whose purpose had seamlessly merged with his own. He felt the soft, rhythmic thrum of Bifrost energy miles away, the gentle, slow drift of stellar dust near a nascent star, the almost imperceptible tremor of a troll's breath in a forgotten cavern. It was as if the universe itself had chosen to whisper its secrets directly into his mind, through the conduit of the hammer. His skin, still shimmering faintly with the intermingled green and gold, now felt less like a barrier and more like a porous membrane, allowing the subtle currents of magic and existence to flow both inward and outward. With this newfound clarity, Loki tested the limits of his transformed satyr. He didn't seek to command or manipulate as he once would have, but rather to harmonize. A thought, gentle and precise, extended from him, guided by Mjolnir's steady hum. The shimmering, iridescent patterns beneath his skin deepened, not with a surge, but with a smooth, controlled expansion. A small, fallen leaf, brittle and brown from ages past, lay forgotten in a corner of the ancient chamber. Without a spoken word or a flamboyant gesture, Loki extended his will, and a soft, emerald gold light enveloped the leaf. The repaired leaf, now shimmering gently in his palm, dissolved into a myriad of tiny, sparkling motes of emerald light, gracefully rejoining the ambient energy of the chamber. Loki's gaze drifted, no longer seeing only the physical stone walls, but the ethereal currents that flowed beneath them, the history etched into their very atoms, the echoes of countless intentions. He felt the silent hum of Asgard's heart, a complex network of power and life, a sacred trust. And with that awareness came a profound shift in his understanding of his own lineage, his brother and his father, the longing for Odin's approval, the envy of Thor's strength, the desire for a throne. These ambitions now seemed like distant, childish echoes, hollow compared to the deep resonance of purpose Mjolnir had instilled within him. The hammer didn't just confer power. It conferred a moral compass, a true north for his erratic soul, the light, a tender embrace rather than a forceful command, coaxed the leaf. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, a faint green blush returned to its desiccated veins. Pushing back against the encroaching brown, it plumped slightly, no longer brittle, but imbued with a gentle resilience. The dust of ages seemed to flake away, replaced by the subtle sheen of new life. It didn't become a vibrant, freshly plucked specimen, but a reawakened echo of what it once was, holding the memory of seasons past within its newly refreshed structure. Loki watched, Mjolnir a steady anchor, feeling the minutes shift in the flow of energy. A quiet understanding settled within him, a realization far removed from the grandiose displays of power he once sought. This wasn't about domination, but balance. He wasn't bending reality to his will, but rather assisting its own gentle inclination towards life. Mjolnir did not roar its approval, but resonated with a deep, content thrum that seemed to echo in his very bones. The air around him felt cleaner, not just physically, but spiritually, as if the chamber itself acknowledged this small act of quiet renewal. A new current in the cosmic symphony, a soft, sustained note, had been introduced. He lifted his gaze from the revitalized leaf, Mjolnir still a comfortable weight in his hand. The whisper of the universe intensified, not into a clamor, but into a wider, more detailed tapestry of sensations. He could feel the pulse of the great roots of Yggdrasil, miles beneath Asgard, their slow, deliberate growth like a vast, subterranean heartbeat. He sensed the gentle shimmer of Heimdall's gaze from the Bifrost, a beacon of watchful silence. It was not mere information, but an empathic connection, understanding the purpose behind these forces. With Mjolnir, his influence now felt capable of extending beyond a single leaf, perhaps even touching the very fabric of the realm, not to disrupt, but to subtly align. The quiet understanding that had settled within Loki lingered, a gentle afterglow of the leaf's renewal. Mjolnir felt less like a weapon and more like a resonant extension of himself, its weight comforting, its hum a steady lullaby. He remained in the chamber for a long while, simply breathing, letting the newly purified air fill his lungs. The iridescent patterns beneath his skin, once a chaotic display of nascent power, now pulsed with a rhythmic, controlled luminescence, like the slow, deep beat of a hidden heart. He finally turned, a quiet resolve in his eyes, and stepped from the ancient chamber. The heavy stone door, which once felt like a barrier to his ambitions, now merely marked a threshold. His steps were unhurried, echoing softly on the polished stone floors of the antechamber. He found himself drawn towards a wider corridor, less grand than the main halls, yet imbued with a quiet dignity. Along its length, intricate carvings depicted celestial events, now softened by centuries of touch and time. He paused, Mjolnir's thrum a subtle rhythm against his palm, and ran a gloved finger along a section of the wall where the stone seemed to weep a faint, almost invisible moisture. It was a minute flaw, a slow erosion that would, over millennia, compromise the integrity of the ancient structure. A younger Loki would have dismissed it, perhaps even subtly exacerbated it for amusement. The quiet understanding that had settled within Loki lingered, a gentle afterglow of the leaf's renewal. Mjolnir felt less like a weapon and more like a resonant extension of himself, its weight comforting, its hum a steady lullaby. He remained in the chamber for a long while, simply breathing, letting the newly purified air fill his lungs. The iridescent patterns beneath his skin, once a chaotic display of nascent power, now pulsed with a rhythmic, controlled luminescence, like the slow, deep beat of a hidden heart. He finally turned, a quiet resolve in his eyes, and stepped from the ancient chamber. The heavy stone door, which once felt like a barrier to his ambitions, now merely marked a threshold. A subtle satisfaction bloomed within Loki, not the ego-driven thrill of a trick well played, but the quiet contentment of an imbalance set right. The repaired section of the wall, though subtly changed, felt stronger, more enduring. Mjolnir's hum softened again, a deeper resonance now that its energy had been used not for destruction, but for subtle creation. He continued his unhurried walk, the corridor's intricate carvings seeming to tell a new story in the wake of his small act of preservation. He passed ornate doors, each leading to a different facet of Asgardian life: armories, archives, dining halls, but none called to him. Instead, he found himself drawn to a rarely used antechamber, its entrance marked by a pair of unadorned, heavy wooden doors. Loki stepped further into the observatory, his steps muted by the layers of fine cosmic dust. The vastness of the space, usually awe-inspiring, now felt comforting, a grand quietude that mirrored the stillness settling within him. Mjolnir felt like a warm, anchoring presence against his leg, its weight a gentle reminder of both power and purpose. He gazed up at the oculus, watching the slow, majestic drift of unknown nebulae and star clusters, each a tiny, distant spark in the cosmic tapestry. The silence in the observatory was profound, broken only by the soft, rhythmic thrum of Mjolnir, a sound that seemed to synchronize with his own calm breathing. This was not the silence of neglect, but of deep slumber waiting. Loki pushed the heavy doors inward, their ancient hinges groaning softly, a sound like a distant, tired sigh. Dust motes, disturbed by the subtle shift in air pressure, danced in the ethereal glow cast by Mjolnir, which still hummed a soft, almost imperceptible tune against his thigh. The antechamber was not grand, nor was it opulent. Instead, it was a space of quiet disuse, a repository of forgotten things. Tall, slender windows, long obscured by grime, allowed only slivers of diffused light to pierce the perpetual twilight within, painting faint, diagonal stripes across the stone floor. The air hung thick and still, carrying the faint, earthy scent of ancient parchment and long-dormant magic, a fragrance distinct from the clean, crisp air of the renewed chamber he had just left. The table before him held not the expected weapons or artifacts of power, but a collection of neglected scrolls, their bindings fragile, their parchment yellowed and brittle with age. They were not official decrees or heroic sagas, but what appeared to be humble records, chronicles of minor events, administrative notes, and forgotten family lineages. One scroll, half unfurled, caught Loki's eye. Its script was archaic, even by Asgardian standards, a delicate, flowing hand that spoke of patience and meticulous dedication. He carefully reached out, his fingers brushing the parchment, and a faint shimmer of green energy, almost imperceptible, emanated from his touch, revitalizing the brittle fibers just enough to prevent further decay. Mjolnir thrummed a gentle approval, its deep resonance echoing the subtle magic Loki instinctively employed. As Loki sifted through the dusty documents, a soft glow emanated from a small, unassuming wooden box nestled beneath a pile of older, more faded parchments. It was simple in its construction, unadorned, lacking the intricate carvings or jewel inlays typical of Asgardian craftsmanship. Yet, Mjolnir pulsed with a stronger, more insistent hum, its subtle vibration growing warmer against his palm. A silent urging, he gently pushed aside the scrolls, revealing the box fully. It was not locked, merely latched. With a delicate movement, Loki unclasped it. With a breath held as still as the ancient air, Loki unfurled the yellowed scroll a little further. The parchment, now supple from his subtle touch, yielded willingly, revealing more of the delicate script. It spoke not of battles won or glorious conquests, but of celestial alignments, the quiet ebb and flow of cosmic energies, and the intricate, often unseen, weave of fate that bound realms together. His eyes, accustomed to seeking out grand pronouncements and hidden agendas, found themselves tracing lines that detailed the migrations of forgotten peoples, the subtle shifting of ley lines beneath Asgard itself, and the slow, almost imperceptible growth of certain enchanted forests on distant worlds. Mjolnir, nestled against his thigh, pulsed with a low, steady rhythm, like a distant heart, a deep resonance that seemed to echo the very subtle energies described within the scroll. A small, intricately drawn diagram, tucked into a corner of the parchment, depicted a constellation Loki did not immediately recognize. Its stars aligned in a pattern that hinted at ancient magic and forgotten prophecies, a silent counterpoint to the thunderous power he now possessed. The antechamber, with its muted light and dusty quiet, seemed to deepen around him, becoming a chamber of secrets rather than mere storage. As Loki continued to decipher the ancient script, a new pattern began to emerge from the seemingly disparate notes. These were not the bombastic tales of heroism he had grown up with, but rather quiet observations on the nature of guardianship, of unseen vigilance, and the profound responsibility of wielding power not for glory, but for balance. The scroll spoke of a hammer of harmony, not merely a weapon of thunder, but an instrument designed to mend rifts between realms, to nurture fledgling life, and to guide lost stars back to their paths. It was a stark contrast to the narratives of conquest and might that filled Asgard's grand halls. A faint, almost imperceptible ripple of energy moved through the air, stirring the dust motes into a slow dance, a quiet confirmation of the scroll's hidden truths. Mjolnir, in turn, shifted its vibration from a deep thrum to a gentle, almost tender pulse, a resonant echo of the quiet power described within the ancient texts. Loki's fingers, usually poised for deception, now traced the delicate curves of the ancient script with a newfound reverence. The words resonated not just in his mind, but deep within the very core of his being, a harmony that Mjolnir's gentle pulse echoed. He understood now that this was not a weapon to shatter, but a tool to mend. The hammer of harmony was meant to bridge the cosmic chasms, to soothe the tumultuous energies of nascent stars, and to guide lost civilizations away from the precipice of chaos. He felt the weight of that truth, a far heavier burden than any he had ever sought to impose upon others. A faint, almost melodic hum began to emanate from Mjolnir, a soft song of universal balance. As the melody from Mjolnir deepened, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred within Loki himself. The familiar gnawing restlessness that often accompanied his schemes seemed to recede, replaced by a quiet current of something akin to purpose. He carefully rolled the ancient scroll, its whispered secrets now echoing clearly in his mind, and secured it within a hidden compartment of his armor. A silent pact, Mjolnir, still humming softly, felt lighter in his grasp, no longer just a powerful object, but an extension of a greater, more delicate will. The antechamber, which once held forgotten treasures, now felt like a sacred chamber, a birthplace of a different destiny. He turned his gaze towards the chamber's exit, not with his usual calculating glint, but with a contemplative stillness, as if weighing the unseen scales of the cosmos. And so the story ends. If you enjoyed this journey through an alternate universe, subscribe for more lore explorations every week. Drop a comment with a topic you would like us to cover next. Sleep well. Loki stepped away from the ancient antechamber, the heavy, ornate door closing behind him with a soft sigh that echoed through the quiet corridor. The air here, though familiar, seemed to hold a different kind of stillness, a reverent silence that had perhaps always been present, but only now revealed itself to his newly attuned senses. Mjolnir, nestled in his hand, pulsed with a rhythm that felt like a quiet heartbeat against his palm, a steady reminder of the profound shift within him. He moved with an unfamiliar grace, not the agile stealth of a trickster, but the deliberate, almost solemn tread of someone carrying a sacred trust. The usual chill of the Asgardian stone now felt almost comforting, a stable anchor in the swirling currents of his destiny. Each step Loki took along the mosaic-patterned floor seemed to resonate with a deeper echo than before, a subtle harmony within the very structure of the palace. The intricate carvings on the walls, once mere decorative flourishes, now appeared to hum with latent energies, their ancient stories whispering to his enhanced perception. Mjolnir's gentle thrum grew marginally stronger, almost as if the hammer was drawing out these hidden cadences from the stones themselves, weaving them into its own quiet song. A soft, cool breeze, laden with the scent of distant Asgardian gardens, drifted through an open archway, momentarily lifting strands of his dark hair and offering a brief, refreshing touch against his cheek. He reached a wide, arched entrance that opened into one of Asgard's lesser-known courtyards, a tranquil space bathed in the gentle, perpetual twilight of the realm. A single, ancient golden tree, its leaves a shimmering cascade of amber and emerald, stood at its center, radiating a soft, ambient warmth. Loki paused, the hammer of harmony, now feeling less like an object and more like a living extension of his own reformed will. He observed the subtle dance of light across the tree's ancient bark, sensing the delicate network of life force that sustained it. A connection he had never truly acknowledged before. His gaze then drifted upwards, past the courtyard's high, arching walls, towards the distant, star-dusted veil of the Bifrost. A silent promise of duties yet to unfold. The corridor opened onto one of the palace's many sweeping balconies, a familiar haunt of his from which he had often watched the cosmos turn, plotting schemes as intricate as the constellations themselves. Tonight, however, he stepped through the archway not as a prince in the shadows, but as something else entirely. The night air of Asgard was crisp and cool, carrying the faint, sweet scent of starlight and blooming night jewels from the imperial gardens far below. He walked to the edge, his free hand resting on the cool, smooth stone of the balustrade. Mjolnir remained a warm, living weight in his other hand, its rhythmic pulse a quiet counterpoint to the vast, silent expanse before him. Below, the city of Asgard was a breathtaking tapestry of gold and silver light, its towers and bridges gleaming under the eternal twilight of the realm. He lifted his gaze from the city to the sky above. The celestial dome was a familiar masterpiece, the swirling nebula of the Bifrost's origin, painting a ribbon of color across the void. But his perception, sharpened by the hammer's touch, saw more. He could feel the atmospheric pressure, the subtle dance of cosmic winds that flowed between the 9 realms. He felt the static potential coiled within the thin, high clouds that had begun to gather, drawn by his presence like iron filings to a lodestone. They were faint, barely visible wisps against the stardusted darkness, but to him they felt like a gathering army of whispers, a reservoir of power awaiting a command. Almost without conscious thought, compelled by this new instinct, Loki slowly raised the hand holding Mjolnir. He did not lift it high in a triumphant gesture, but merely extended it forward over the balustrade, holding it parallel to the sleeping city below. The movement was fluid, unpracticed, yet perfect. As the hammer cleared the stone railing, the ancient runes carved into its metallic faces began to awaken. A soft, ethereal blue-white light bloomed from within the Uru, not a harsh flash, but a steady, gentle glow that pulsed in time with the hammer's rhythm. The light washed over his hand, tracing the lines of his leather glove, and spilling onto the stone floor of the balcony, painting his dark attire in shades of twilight and storm. The weight of Mjolnir, once a symbol of his brother's brute strength and simple heroism, now felt different. In his hand, it was not merely a tool of thunder, but a conduit for something more intricate, more profound. He felt the hammer respond to the currents within him, not just his ambition, but a deeper, almost forgotten desire for order, for protection. A faint emerald glow, subtle as morning mist, began to emanate from the runes etched into Mjolnir's head, mirroring a new, quiet spark in Loki's own eyes. The metallic scent of ozone, a whisper of impending storm, began to mix with the floral night air. He extended his free hand, palm open, toward the distant, coalescing storm clouds. There was no theatrical gesture, no dramatic pronouncement, only a quiet, almost imperceptible command flowing from his will into the hammer, and then outward into the night. The clouds responded, swelling, darkening, beginning to swirl with a nascent, soft luminescence from within. They were not merely reacting to the hammer, but to him, to the subtle shift in his inherent magic that Mjolnir now amplified and directed. The cool breeze intensified, carrying the first faint scent of rain, a single delicate thread of lightning, not bright and fierce, but pale and almost translucent, drifted from his outstretched fingertips towards the distant clouds. It was a tendril of his will made visible, a whisper of the power he now commanded. The city lights of Asgard below seemed to dim slightly in comparison, as the celestial canvas above became the true spectacle. Loki watched it, a flicker of wonder in his usually calculating eyes, recognizing the sheer, unadulterated potential that Mjolnir had unlocked within him, waiting to be shaped not by fury, but by focus. The nascent storm acknowledged him. The clouds, once mere smudges against the cosmic tapestry, now formed an organized vanguard, their inner glow deepening from a subtle luminescence to a soft, emerald pulse that mirrored Mjolnir's own. They coiled and spiraled with an almost sentient grace, a silent symphony conducted by his unspoken will. Loki felt the shift not just in the air around him, but deep within his own arcane reserves, a resonance between the hammer, the brewing storm, and his inherent magic. It was not merely channeling power, it was weaving it, an intricate dance that felt more natural than any spell he had ever cast. He could discern the individual droplets forming in the darkening sky, feel the subtle pressure of the rising humidity against his skin, a promise of imminent release. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the very fabric of the void, a sound that bypassed his ears and settled directly in his chest, a deep, comforting vibration. It was the first true voice of the storm, a prelude to its awakening. Within the deepest folds of the now intensely dark clouds, a faint, internal flash of electric blue briefly illuminated their emerald core, a silent burst of raw power, contained and refined. It was not the jarring crack of thunder Thor typically commanded, but a whisper of its might, a gentle, almost benevolent pulse. Loki observed it with a newfound tranquility. The chaos he once delighted in creating was now being harnessed, shaped, and directed by his touch, transformed into a force of protective majesty. Then, with a sigh like the turning of a cosmic page, the first delicate drops of rain began to fall. They were not a deluge, but a soft, almost hesitant patter, each crystalline bead catching the faint emerald and blue light from above before vanishing into the unseen expanse below. The cool moisture kissed his skin, a stark contrast to the usual arid chill of the void, grounding him, reminding him of Midgard, of realms that truly needed such cleansing power. A gentle, sweeping current of air, infused with the fresh scent of precipitation and heightened ozone, flowed past him, rustling invisible cosmic dust. It was a tangible breath of the transformed atmosphere, a subtle but undeniable confirmation that his command, woven with Mjolnir's ancient magic, had reshaped the very elements. Loki let his hand fall slightly, easing his stance.